Hello and welcome back to Stu Structures. I am Mark Stewart and we're here to continue our build on the freight house with this video number 9 in the series. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back to start working on this freight house again. At the end of the last video when I was watching it before I uploaded it, I realized I'd made one kind of major mistake in the building. And I don't know, maybe some of you out there noticed it too, but I went back and corrected it. So anyway, what I want to do is, if any of you out there really realized what I had done, comment at the bottom of this video. Next week, the very first person that commented on the mistake that I made, I'll just send a little grab bag of maybe some scenery details, some of that stuff that I had molded as extra stuff when I mold, some of the crates, barrels, 55-gallon drums, some of that stuff, maybe a tabletop or two. But in any case, I can't believe I did it, but it's just my duh. I make mistakes, and it was one I could correct. But it is what it is. So anyway, we're back home and we're ready to start work on this building again. I'm going to go ahead and start on the second floor and get some of that in here to add some stability to the building and make it a little more solid. The more you handle these, the more the joints want to work their way loose in the glue if you don't have them glued properly. So the more structure we get in here and the more I handle it, the safer it will be to handle it. So we're just going to jump into this and get started, so let's go. The first thing I want to do is backtrack here. In the last video I told you when I came through and painted it, I had forgot to put the brick over the archway for this vent structure. So I had to cut a few more of these little tiny bricks, but I came back and scraped some paint off and just glued those in place. Now, to start with this second story structure, the only thing I have that gives me information on this was the original set of blueprints to this building. And this second little tiny building was never built off of that. So if you're looking at old blueprints, be careful of what actually was built. But this kind of gives you the height of it. You can figure everything out from this, and basically with the floor and the overhead rafters, it's about 12 feet. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out of this real thick sign. I like using this styrene from these signs because it's just a lot cheaper, and this no parking sign that I found is a lot thicker than a lot of the for sale signs and that type of stuff, so I use it for a lot of my builds. And once I had that blueprint and measured the sizes, I just came back and cut all 4 walls for that second story structure. Now the medium wall that goes in the middle of the building across the structure, I went ahead and added a couple of feet to that so it can slide down in between the walls to give it structural support. And then I come back and go ahead and cut some more of these roof supports for that first story roof, because I'm going to need one of these in a minute, and I'll explain that when I get to it here. But once I get all that cut, I come back and just make sure all the edges are nice and smooth and there's no flashing, because when I cut these, I just make 2 or 3 swift cuts with my knife and then snap them. And that breaks the plastic nice and clean, but sometimes it does leave just a little bit of a flashing or error in the plastic where it broke, so it's just good to clean up the edges once that's all said and done. So coming back and looking at this now that I've got the walls cut, I need to lay out all these windows. So, from this I know how tall the walls are, so I can get this to scale and figure out, where the windows are laid out in the building. And I know the tops of the windows and the bottoms are all the same all the way around, so I just lay out the windows in these on all these walls here. And then I come back with my Dremel and drill the holes so the nibbler can get in there and do its thing, and I'm just following the same process for this soft plastic as I did all that real brittle plastic that I used for brick. And then once I use the nibbler, it gets it really, real close to the line. I don't have to file and get perfect edges with this. I do use my knife and clean up the edges a little bit, but remember, the windows on this second story are framed windows, so the outside of the window will actually set over this lip a little bit. Now along the bottom of the two side walls is where the roof for the overhangs initially were. So there's this wooden piece, so the metal does not come to the bottom of the walls on either of these sides. So I cut this paper strip that will mimic that wood across the bottom of the structure, and that'll give me an edge to add the metal to the side of this building. Now I could have used plastic corrugated styrene for the walls, but I decided not to. I do have all this Campbell Scales aluminum, which is corrugated. Probably have enough for this building, but what I decided to do was try something new. So I came back here and I have this corrugated plastic, which I would not have had enough to do all the walls with. So what I'm going to do is take this aluminum foil and cut 8-foot tall strips out of this aluminum foil in HO gauge. And then what I'm going to do is make some corrugated strips using this brush. And what I do is I just tape those 8-foot strips down across that styrene, which is also taped down the board so nothing moves, and I use a real stiff bristle brush and just come down and force the aluminum tinfoil down into all those crevices and basically make a real long strip of this. And you know, this is a little soft. You could use a thicker tinfoil than what I used, but all I had was the thin stuff, so I just went with what I had. The thicker stuff would probably be better. But then I come back with a scale rule and a square, and I just, every 4 feet, I cut sheets of this to use for the corrugated panels to go and glue on top of the styrene walls that I just made. And I just come through and make a whole bunch of these. To begin with here, I'm just making enough for one wall because I want to play with this and make sure it's going to work the way I think it will. This is a new one for me. I'm used to using pre-made stuff, but I think this will be okay.
So we're going to come back and just start adding it to the wall, and I'm running it from where that fake band board is at the bottom up 8 feet all the way across the panel, and I'm just going right over the windows and everything because I can come back and cut them out at after I get it all glued on. And then that's exactly what I do. I just come back and glue those or cut those out, and then we'll start working with the second sheet once those are cut out. It's just easy to do with a real sharp knife. The tinfoil does dull the knife to some degree quicker than normal things would, but then after we put the second row on and cut the bottom part of the window out of that too, then we have one whole completed wall with all of the corrugated metal on that wall. Once we get the walls to that point, we need windows to put these in. Now remember, this one double wide window I have to manufacture out of 2 of these Tichy windows. So I just came back and made that. And the door, I don't have a door without a skylight. So I'm just taking one of these Tichy doors and I'm going to cut the skylight out of it and then move the header from the door down on top the door. And then you see this finished product for a door. So now we have a door and a scrap piece of skylight window that we can put in the box and use for something else at some later point in time. Then we want to come back and pre-paint all these. So I just put some tape down on my wood block that I use for painting and tape all these down to that on the back side where the lack of paint won't show. And then I go outside with a rattle can and just flat back paint all of the windows and doors for this whole structure. And so now after we let these set up a little bit, we have all these to work with. And when the panels are done, we just come back and set those into those holes, and on the back side glue them into place with some styrene glue, and then we have panels ready to go. Now another thing, I want to start putting these little extra plastic on the back that will overlap the lower story walls to get me a better glue surface. So I'm just coming back here and adding a wide strip across the whole bottom, and then putting these tabs which will stick down behind the whole wall. That way the walls will set out flush with the brick wall on the outside. And then we have 4 walls to put up. Now I'm not going ahead and putting the foil on the wall that comes down on the very end of the brick, and I'll go into more of that and discuss that a little later on. But basically then we just come back and start mounting all those walls. And I start with this end wall and get it glued on. Then I do the two side walls and then the wall that crosses the structure in the middle of the structure. Now remember, on this end wall, I don't have any good photographs of this for when it had windows. This original drawing shows a door and two windows on that. A friend of mine, Glenn Bartlett, went and took pictures because mine just didn't show it that well. And in these angle shots of across that end of the structure, you can see where there is just one panel of metal that was added on over what I'm assuming was an open window at one time. So to me this just says there was one window and not two, so I laid it out that way. So this structure is getting to the point now where I'm feeling really good about where it's going. So we're just going to go ahead and put it on the turntable and call this episode a wrap when we get this done here. But you can see that the second story is all on there. I mean, we have some work to do with this to get everything complete, obviously, and there's more work to do to the first floor. But at this point it's really starting to look like the structure that I'm trying to model, and everything's coming together pretty good. There's a couple little hiccups that I'll explain more here at the end, but basically it's coming together well.
So there you have another segment of Stu Structures. It's great to be home and getting some more work done on this building. A few things I just didn't think about when I was putting this together, but when I cut the walls, I cut these end walls to meet on the inside edge of the side walls, not thinking about the double thickness of the plastic. So when I mounted these walls flush to the outside of this wall, then I had a small gap where the two sheets would meet in the corner. So I had to come back and add a thin piece of plastic. We can see this one I haven't even cut off. I ran it a little wild up there. On both of these walls where they meet in the corners. So there's some things that you just you don't think of in advance, and even kit manufacturers, when they're making kits, they'll make a kit and then put it together and realize their mistakes and go back and fix those mistakes and then make another kit and build it to make sure everything's right before they go into production on a kit. But when you're doing a one-time build on a building like this, you're not going back and redoing the kit. You're just fixing mistakes as you go along. So that's what we came up to with this situation. And I did go ahead and use that real thin foil. Now it kind of does leave a slight rippled effect in the corrugated metal after you glue it down, and you really got to be careful not to gouge it and stuff, because you're going to leave just huge imprints in it. So a thicker tin foil would be better than this real thin stuff I had that I used. I just didn't have any thick stuff at the moment, so I used what I had on hand. The other thing, you notice we didn't put the foil on this end wall, and the reasoning is I wanted to run that down across the top row of brick or so to cover this joint here. And if I put it on there prior to mounting this, I was going to the foil is so thin, I was just going to mess it all up, and I was afraid of that. So I figured I would just go ahead and mount that one wall on here, and then then put the foil on so it would cover that joint and not damage the foil. And this other end, you can see the reasons why I went ahead and cut these roof supports that go in here to support the roof, because I needed one to mount to this wall to run the foil to on that wall. And then the roof will come up over that and hide that joint. But in any case, we've got the second story on the building now at this point. It's starting to look like more of a structure, and like the original at that. I'm very pleased with it at this point. The vent, we've still got a little work to do with on this end. The door bottoms, the floor support, all that. There's just so many things to continue on with this building, and we'll get started with that in the next video. This is coming together quick now. We should be able just to run right through this. The hardest part now is going to be putting all the roofs and the walkways and stuff on the outside around the building. The rest of it should come together pretty quick. I'm debating on the roof on this structure. Originally it looks like that was probably a slate roof, and then it was changed later on in life, and then during our time period I'm not sure, it probably would have had shingles on it, but I might go ahead and do the slate roof on this. I'm not really sure. We might think about that one while we're working with some more of this build. In any case, thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me, and hopefully you're scratch building a building there yourself as we're going through some of these. Hopefully not making the mistakes that I'm making. Hopefully you're learning something by these mistakes so that it saves you some of those processes as you're building your own buildings. But do what works for you. Some of these things, you know, I'm okay with them. Some rivet counters out there would probably do things a slightly different way and be a little more authentic in the end result than what I am, but I'm okay with what I'm doing with all these. I think they're going to be nice looking structures. So anyway, like and subscribe to the channel. You know, if you subscribe and hit the bell next to it down below, then you'll be notified every time another video comes out in the series. And I do throw some oddities in there from time to time. I've got a couple others that I'm working on that in between buildings I'll throw up another subject matter for a video one week to cover some things we haven't covered in building buildings. But in any case, like I said before, thank you for coming back and sharing this time with me. I really enjoy modeling, and I hope you do too. I hope you're playing with some of your trains and just enjoy it. Have fun, you know, create your own little world. It's a good way to escape from reality. It helps me take my mind off a lot of things that would just drive me probably nuts otherwise. So in any case, happy model railroading.